All right, we shall start then. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today to hear more about careers for life scientists. We're very excited to have you with us today, and I'm very happy for the fantastic people we have with us today to share their stories and their experience for a career outside of the lab. My name is Daniel. I'm a first-year PhD student in medicine and a life scientist myself, and I'm with QTech, the Cambridge University Technology and Enterprise Club. QTech is one of the largest entrepreneurship societies at the University of Cambridge, and you can find our activities at qtech.io. First of all, I would like to say a big thank you to the team who have been working really hard to make this event happen. Please feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn. We are also hosting a podcast called Q Talks by QTech, the leading how-to podcast series for tech founders and aspiring innovators. And we've had some really incredible guests so far, including founders, investors, and experts. And this webinar is actually part of our live events as part of Q Talks. So if you're bored at home and looking for new content, do go and check out the podcast at the link in the chat. You can also see our other activities that QTech is involved in there. But today is all about careers, and we organized this event together with the brilliant team from the Biodata Innovation Center at the Wellcome Genome campus. And it's an absolute pleasure to introduce Jo Mills to you, who is my co-host today. Hey, Jo.
Hi, Daniel, and thank you so much for the kind introduction. And we are absolutely delighted to be working with QTech on this event today. As Daniel said, I'm Jo Mills. I am Entrepreneurship and Innovation Centre Manager at the Wellcome Genome campus. For those of you who don't know, it's located in Hinxton, just to the south of Cambridge, and was founded some 27 years ago by the health charity The Wellcome Trust as part of the global endeavour to sequence the human genome. It's home to two leading research institutes, the Wellcome Sanger Institute and the European Molecular Biology Laboratories European Bioinformatics Institute. At the campus, we have a vision to be the world-leading innovation ecosystem for genomes and biodata so that we can aim to create social benefit and impact by improving lives and health outcomes through our science in genomics and biodata. We have an innovation centre on campus, our Biodata Innovation Centre, which provides a home for teams innovating in genomes and biodata. And our focus is on creating a really great ecosystem for collaborations and innovations and ideas around our field. We have 8 companies as part of our current Innovation Centre community and a very focused set of gateway criteria to select the companies that join us. And we find there's a huge value in that for both the campus and for the companies themselves. The other part of our work within our entrepreneurship and innovation team focuses on delivering events and initiatives to inspire scientists to embrace innovation and entrepreneurship and also other career possibilities, which is why it's so great to work with QTech today on this event. We also work and support scientists within the Wellcome Sanger Institute to try and help them take a view on commercialising their science too. Before we get underway with today's session, I'd like to highlight a couple of points to help us all get the most from today's session. Firstly, my colleague Anka is behind the scenes to make sure the session runs smoothly. She currently has everyone muted so that we're all free from distractions and we can hear the conversation clearly. We've developed this event in 2 parts. So firstly, we'll have a panel discussion with our speakers, which will be followed by networking with the speakers individually in breakout rooms. So just to let you know, we're recording the panel discussion that you'll hear first, but not actually the breakout rooms for the networking. So that will be free from the recording. We're using Zoom as the platform today. Many of you will now be very familiar with Zoom, and we recommend that for the best experience, you actually click the button at the top right-hand corner and watch this on speaker view. For the networking session, we'll be placing you into breakout rooms, and you have the opportunity to choose which speaker and which breakout room you'd like to be in. To enable us to allocate you to the right breakout room, you need to rename yourself, and you can do this by going to your image on the screen or your name on the screen and clicking on the 3 little dots in the top right hand corner, and you'll see a point that says rename. And if you could just pop a number 1, 2, 3 or 4 ahead of your name, then that will help us to allocate you into the right rooms. So it's number 1 to speak with Mariya, number 2 to speak with Daniel, number 3 to speak with Hannah from Juno Bio, and number 4 to speak with Peter Fish. So if you could please rename yourselves during the course of the panel discussion, that would be brilliant, and then you'll magically appear in the right breakout room. And finally, when we're in the breakout rooms, we really encourage active participation. So please have a think about the questions you'd like to ask our speakers. And we have moderators in every room who can make sure that everyone has the opportunity to ask the questions that they would like to do so. Daniel, over to you.
Thank you, Jo, for the introduction. So we can now start our Q&A session, our panel discussion. And I'm really happy to say that we are joined today by 4 fantastic speakers. Thank you all very, very much for taking the time to be here with us today. So first of all, we have Mariya, who is a business development associate at the Wellcome Sanger Institute, just outside of Cambridge. We then have Daniel, who is the co-founder and chief scientific officer at Chronomics, a company providing a digital platform using epigenetics to give people the knowledge of how their environment and lifestyle is affecting their health. I would also like to welcome Hannah, who founded Juno Bio, a company with the aim to improve women's health. And we also have Peter with us today, who is currently a business development lead within Cosmic, a Sanger-led online catalog for somatic mutations in cancer. And he's also co-founder of Pexi, a women's health company providing personalized contraception. All 4 of you have very interesting career paths, and we are very excited to hear more about your stories, what made you choose your paths, and any advice you might have for current life science students. So we would like to start our panel discussion with a short introduction. If you could please tell us a bit more about how you have got to where you are now, if this was an intentional or proactive approach, or if you just went with the flow and harnessed the opportunities that presented themselves. Shall we start with Hannah from Juno Bio, please?
Of course, yeah. So I'm Hannah, and as Daniel said, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Juno Bio, which is a women's health company that is looking to map the world's vaginal microbiomes and really improve the standard of care that's available for women. My background is in biology and biochemical engineering. So I went to Imperial and then UCL, and then I started to work on a number of different projects and companies that really had microbiomes at the core of what they were doing. So one of the most notable things that I was doing was for a company in their lab optimizing a soil microbiome derived consortia to clean wastewater. But one of the things that I quickly saw as I was working in the space was that you had this huge amounts of research and commercialization of soil, the gut microbiome, etc., but virtually nothing in the vaginal microbiome space. And it shocked me because it's so readily harnessable and so important to women's health. So I knew that something was definitely needed for this space. I didn't know that it was necessarily in the form of a startup, but I knew that that was one route that you could make a really big impact and quickly. So I joined this community called Entrepreneur First, where you try and find a co-founder that you can work with. And so I knew that I needed a sort of data genomics type person. And then we were backed by the Illumina Accelerator shortly after that and moved over to the US to really start to accelerate our vaginal microbiome work. And we ran one of the biggest studies the world has seen when it comes to vaginal microbiomes, and are now at the point where we're ready to commercialize our very first product.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Can I ask Peter to introduce yourself as well?
Thanks very much, Daniel. So my background originally started off in academics. I spent 12 years in academics, first off starting with molecular genetics themselves, and then crossed over into clinical medicine, and then went on further into the academic side of business and did an MBA. Alongside all of the studies, I built a number of companies, many of which failed, some of which went on to have some limited success, but every single one of them brought unique learnings for me along the way. But along that process, I realized really where my passion lay was in innovative, scalable healthcare systems. So I moved over to the UK from South Africa, where I'm originally from, based myself in Cambridge and got involved in everything and attended every single conference I could find and just networked until I connected up. So right now I'm involved in 3 different projects. One, as mentioned, I look after innovation and business elements within Cosmic. At the Sanger, I'm I head clinical strategy at Mentees, a startup that focuses on digital methods that can assist in shortening the rare disease diagnostic odyssey. We have a pilot running in the NHS at the moment. And also, as mentioned, I'm a co-founder of Pexi, which is a startup that focuses on female health by optimizing underlying hormones. And our first starting point is really precision contraception. But along the way, really, I think that certain things were intentional and certain things really were left to chance. What I can say was intentional were the foundations of what I did, and the boundaries that I created when I set this up. So some of these are vocational, as in where my passion lay from a job point of view, but some of these were just around my lifestyle and my day-to-day work elements that I wanted to bring in. So I knew life sciences, medicine, business and information and innovation were really what I was interested in. But beyond that, I kind of left it to chance, although just made sure I landed up in the right place at the right time. But I never had set out to get involved in the particular projects that I'm in, but I'm very, very happy that it has played out like it has played out.
Thank you very much, Peter. Your video was a bit lacking at the end, but I hope everyone got everything. I would like to ask Mariya to introduce herself, who is currently at the Wellcome Sanger Institute.
Hi, so I'm Mariya. I'm a business development associate in the translation office at the Sanger Institute. And I have to say that my transition into this role was quite opportunistic. I started off in academia. I did a PhD in, it was the Department of Pharmacology, but really it was structural biology at the University of North Carolina. And then I decided that I wanted to learn more about stem cells. So I moved to Cambridge after my postdoc. And there I worked as a postdoc for about 7 years in stem cell research. And then I moved over to the Sanger Institute and became what's known as a staff scientist here, and then eventually a senior scientific manager within one of the groups there, where I really started to take on bigger projects that involved coordinating the activities of multiple teams. And that experience taught me that while I liked science, what I really liked was bringing different people together to achieve a larger goal, and also doing science that was bigger than just my project. And in addition, along that path, I'd always been interested in commercialization as well, and done several, I guess, competitions and stuff through QTech, as well as other programs within Cambridge University to expose myself to that area. And then when my contract as the senior scientific manager was coming to an end, a position was advertised in the translation office, and I applied for it and got it. So I will say it was quite opportunistic, but I'm glad that I ended up where I did end up.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mariya. And I'm glad you have a touch point with the Sanger and QTech, which makes you a perfect fit for our guests today. And last but not least, we have Daniel, who is with Chronomics. And over to you, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi, everyone. It's fantastic to be here today. So I'm Danny. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer and also one of the co-founders at Chronomics. So I guess my journey into the startup world is a mixture of both, I guess, opportunity and proactively kind of searching something different. So I actually have a background in biotechnology, which I did back in Spain, and then move on to do Master's and PhD at the University of Cambridge and also at the European Bioinformatics Institute. And back then I was essentially very interested on epigenetics, aging, and essentially computational tools to look at these things, and more specifically quantifying the aging process in humans using this new epigenetic data that has been shown to be able to do this very, very accurately. And back then, I also met Dr. Thomas Tabbs, who's the CEO and co-founder at Chronomics, and he was working kind of on the same problem at the Abraham Institute, which is another campus close by. More, I guess, from the mouse side of things, but we got along very well, both, I guess, personally and scientifically. And we started to discuss essentially, what else could be done beyond, our PhD projects. And, we started to think of the power of this type of epigenetic data, DNA methylation data, to actually quantify risk factors for complex diseases. So the aging process is one of them, but also things like exposure to specific toxins or metabolic risk, things like that, and how that would be useful in the context of preventative healthcare, and how great it would be to really make people be able to access this complex data and this complex tools. So I guess it was back then when, this was kind of an idea. And we got contacted quite serendipitously by an accelerator, Rebel Bio. So they actually sent me a LinkedIn message, which is quite a, when you think back about it, it was quite a random event that triggered a lot of things. And yeah, we basically were, at the stage where we had this idea and we were kind of excited to bring it forward in some sort of project. And, that just opened the possibility of actually going and doing this. So, we found another 2 co-founders. We created a company that didn't exist then. We went through the interview process with the accelerator, and we ended up essentially, stopping, in my case, the PhD for a few months to go and pursue this. So I guess, that was the beginning of Chronomics. So it was a mixture of, I guess, being, doing the research in the right place at the same time that, the opportunity appearing and just embracing it.
Thank you, Daniel. So we collected a couple of questions from our participants at the beginning, just when you guys signed up. And yeah, we'll hand over to Jo now to go ahead and start with the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. And there were some brilliant questions, and it's a shame we probably won't have time to cover all of them, but we selected a number, and I hope we cover many things to explore more about careers in life scientists. So I'm going to start with a question for Peter, actually. Peter, you were in academia and have been a medical and in medicine as well. So what prompted you to explore a career in business and innovation? What was the trigger that made you jump into business?
I think a number of things. The first of which, possibly as a South African, we always in a situation where we have to make things work over there, and we often tend to jump through that gap. So the transition from academia into innovation and business is a little more natural over there. I think out of absolute necessity as well. I funded my studies by setting up some of the first businesses I was involved in, so that unlocked it for me. And I think once you start getting into that business world, suddenly you realize it's not that different from academia in some ways. And in fact, it's a lot less scary than what you anticipate before you jump across. I think those are the early prompting things that pushed me to go across. And beyond that, I was always just involved in many things at the same time. And I think that allowed me to play around a lot and get comfortable with.
Fantastic. Mariya, what are your thoughts? I mean, you jumped into business and innovation a little bit later. What was the trigger for you? Obviously, the opportunity presented itself, but what made you go, yes, I'll apply for this job?
So I think what really attracted me to the job was the idea that I would be getting to work with lots of different stakeholders to achieve a larger aim. I love science, I always have, but I found that during my time in a lab, I was quite focused on sort of just doing one thing. I knew a lot about that one specific area, which was fine, but the projects that I tended to enjoy the most were ones that I was collaborating with heavily with different groups on campus, different institutes and stuff as well. And then during my time as a senior scientific manager, this got taken to a whole new level where I wasn't just doing the work, but running the actual collaborations. And so it involved learning about how things worked from many different angles. And one of the descriptions in the business development role was this idea that you did have to be able to bring together many different pieces to get something to work. And so that really did appeal to me, as well as the idea that you could use commercialization as a way of technology or getting technology adopted more widely, which is where it has the most benefit. So I think that's what really prompted me to apply for the job.
Great.
That sounds really exciting. I really like the collaboration aspect. I have another question for Daniel. So Daniel, you did your PhD at the Amble EBI, and probably at one point you were at a stage where you had to ask yourself, do I want to stay in academia or do something else? And I was wondering, where can PhD students and postdocs get advice on careers outside of the lab? Where did you get your advice from?
Yeah, so I guess events like, the wonderful thing that you guys have organized, the Genome Campus and QTech, are a really good place to start with. I think it's all about, meeting people that are doing what you're thinking about doing and speaking with them. I think people are much more approachable than you originally would think. Sometimes it's a bit scary to just go and drop an email to someone that you just don't know. asking a question or you know, just approaching them in one event. But I think the best career advice, you can actually get it from the people that are, again, doing what you want to do. And I must be honest, in my case, I haven't met that many startup founders when we created this. Obviously, I had been in a few like career events and just speaking with people. But then once I got into this world, then, you know, it became fundamental that you approach people that are maybe a bit ahead in your career path to ask for advice. And, you know, in my experience, it's all about just, you know, pick up the phone or the email, speak with them, and people are really approachable in general.
That's great to hear that you see people as being incredibly approachable. I've got a question actually for Hannah now. Hannah, how did you get the first mentor to help you on your journey? Mentors are such an important part of this. So, and how do mentees find you now? Because presumably you now go on to mentor others.
That's a really good question, Jo. I think the earliest sort of support that I had in the space was from my department at UCL in biochemical engineering. There's a really strong focus on like the iGEM competition, the International Genetically Engineered Machines competition, that I think most life science students are very familiar with. And it was the PI that ran that sort of stream that was really big on helping us widen our view of what the possibilities are when we're working with life sciences and translating it into, you know, commercially viable products or making an impact in the world. And that was really, really valuable for me. I think more department heads and PIs that can do that, it would be beneficial for the life science industry as a whole. Also the Symbicity, or I'm not very familiar with where they are right now, but Symbicity was a sort of thing at Imperial College London, which promoted synthetic biology and different careers in that space. And that was also a very important sort of organization to learn from in terms of like what's possible, where do I go for investment, how do I start, what even is a startup. I remember when the first investor that ever contacted me for a pitch deck, I was like, what's a pitch deck? I'd never heard of the word before. It's essentially a PowerPoint presentation for those that don't know. And as I think Daniel said, you'd be surprised at how open people are and how just dropping an email gets you a coffee and a meeting and help from people who have been there and done it.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm glad to hear that people are very open when you usually approach them. That's a good relief. I have a question for Mariya. So when we think about industry and academia and the differences, basically, is it possible to combine industry and academia? Because sometimes we don't want to choose one, we kind of want to do both. And you talked about collaborations before, so maybe you have any ideas how we as life scientists can start collaborations with non-academic partners, or even ask for internships to gain industrial experience, and how that might work best?
Absolutely. I think a really good place, that's a really great question, Daniel. And I know that a lot of people would like to get some industry experience, you know, if they're in academia, before they transition over. And I think a really good place to start with that is, if you're at a university, is to talk to the people that handle technology transfer within those spaces, because they will have made the contacts within industry and that maybe allow you to get your foot in the door. For example, we've definitely helped PhD students and postdocs within the Sanger with placements within industry settings for a short period of time, so they get a sense of what, you know, if they'd like being there. And also, if you feel as though, because let's face it, industry has certain strengths that academic labs certainly don't have, especially when it comes to things like setting up drug testing platforms and such. And so if you feel like your particular project would benefit from something like that, and it also then gives you a little bit of exposure to what the industry partner might do, then it's a really good idea to reach out to them either directly, but definitely get the people who handle these sort of partnerships for your university involved, as they'll know the best way to go about setting something like this up, that both lets you get something out of the collaboration and make sure that everybody gets what they want out of the collaboration, if that makes sense.
Brilliant, thank you, Mariya. It's great to hear there are opportunities out there for academic researchers to interface with industry and get a little bit of experience through that initial contact. I've got a question for Peter now, and a question about mindsets. How do you switch your mindset from being in academia and doing a job in academia to doing jobs in business? You know, are there any difficulties or new situations that you encountered as you did that?
Yeah, Joe, thanks very much. I think it really goes back to a lot of the focus here today is around that interface between the two. I think we're in a world where we're slowly moving away from that very hard line between the two to an area where people often straddle both sides of the equation in this. So looking across to the US, this is something that actually has been done for many years, and many of the professors that you encounter from US academic universities will have involvement in startups or sit on the board of various startups. And we can see that happening a lot more here in the UK. I mean, the London-based universities are quite proactive, but Cambridge itself has really been pushing in this direction a long time. And I think UTech is a great example of this. So, you know, when I wear my hat, so Cosmic is a good example. The company was born within the Sanger Institute. And 5 years ago, they started to commercialize the Sanger data, the Cosmic data. And interestingly enough, the 5% of the users within Cosmic pay for 95% of the academic and free users. So on the back of the commercialization of Cosmic, we've really ramped that up from something that we had a team of 5 to 6 people to something that currently we have a team of 25 people working on that. And as many people mentioned before, the ability to use this commercial aspect to ramp that up, even in the academic setting, is really, really powerful. And to see that translation from the research into something that you can apply in the clinic today. You know, Cosmic data is being used today, every day for cancer treatment. So there's difficult situations. Actually, I would say that the difficult situations come down to very, you know, traditional academics that really are fearful in crossing over that boundary, and you get a lot of pushback from these individuals. But I think over time, we'll see that starting to relax, and it's becoming far and far easier to have those conversations between the both. I mean, all of the startups that I'm involved in, we generally publish things as well. So it's a little bit academic. You know, what we're doing in the sciences is often involves the generation of new knowledge. And that we can push that back into academia pretty easily, and the collaborations are really becoming much more seamless.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to hear that the collaborations work at the Sanger really well. My next question is for Daniel, and I would like to ask you a question about the working environment. So if you compare academia and your industrial startup working environment, what are the key differences, and how did you find it to adapt?
Yeah, so I think one of the key differences is, for me at least, it was the pace. So I think especially a startup is incredibly fast paced. So a lot of things happen every day, every month. A month in a startup life is ages. That's, you know, a month can be the difference between the startup being successful and the startup not working. So one thing that really, really shocked me is that, you know, suddenly you realize that you can do a lot of things in very little time, things that normally, you know, you would delay, at least in my case, in an academic environment, they need to happen when you're in a startup. And I think that was something that really, really shocked me when I started with this. Obviously, I think that's particular from startups. I think if you go to a bigger industry company, I think it probably is like, depending obviously on the role that you have, but it might be more similar to an academic job. And I think other thing that really enjoy about a startup is the collaboration teamwork aspect. So when you're a startup, you're a team with a very clear objective. And, you know, that creates dynamics inside the team that basically, you know, make you engage a lot in collaboration and very, very tight alignment of what needs to be done. And obviously, again, that depends a lot on the academic group where you are at, but, you know, I know of a lot of people that have felt very isolated when they were in an academic group, or, you know, they felt that they were kind of tensions between, you know, different interests with people trying to publish different things, or, you know, people scoping you, this sort of things. And I think, you know, to a great extent that disappears when you are in a startup, because you're a team with a very clear objective. you all want that to work, and that kind of team spirit really is something that I really, you know, I miss having more of that basically. And I think with the startup, you actually get it.
Brilliant. So a range of experiences then possible in a startup. I have another question now for Mariya, actually. Other skills that you didn't perhaps directly learn during your research career that are actually now essential for you as you're in business and innovation, and how did you, or how can you as a research scientist develop these skills? Do you have any advice for PhD students, postdocs and others in going about this skill development?
So I think, I mean, we talk about translatable skills quite a lot in many different job roles. And for me, making this particular transition, building my translatable skills was key. A lot of that, and I think that's common across all of the different speakers here, the importance of making sure that you have the ability to form connections with lots of people, to network effectively. Those are really important skills for the role that I'm in as well. In addition, if there was an opportunity to take any sort of task on that involved either setting up a collaboration or setting up the framework in which you did something, project management, those sort of roles became really, really important, or are still important for my current job. And I mean, when I entered this position, I clearly lacked a lot of the commercial skills that were necessary for doing what I do now. But once you enter a role like this, and if you enter in an entry-level position, it's assumed that you're going to need training. And I can't imagine there are many offices that do what I do that wouldn't offer that training to an entry-level person. So I went on a course when I first entered, about 3 or 4 months after I joined the translation office, run by an organization called Praxis Oral, which focuses specifically on skills such as reading license agreements, and MTAs, all of the documentation that we need to be well versed in to do what I do. And you go on a course like this, and it's a crash course, and you learn about I guess the other commercial and legal aspects of what you need to do. And then a lot of it is just on the job. You work with people and you learn as you go along. But I would say that, prior to entering a role like this, take on as many opportunities as you can that allow you to kind of expand beyond what you do scientifically and get those translatable skills.
Mariya, we've been asked about Mariya, we've been asked about the name of the course, but I'm just going to say just a question that came up in the chat. So I'll just say that we'll get that out to everybody following on from the session, if that's okay. We'll ask you for the details.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I do have another question for Hannah. So when we just talked about the skills that you need and that you need in industry and academia, and I would like to ask a question about experience. So Hannah, when people apply in industry or like in startups, maybe even your startup, how can candidates coming from an academic background make them stand out? Is it having a PhD? Is it having a lot of postdoc experience? Or what are you looking for?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and of course very dependent on the job that we're looking for. But I should say that being technically brilliant is necessary, but absolutely not sufficient when you're wanting to work for an early stage startup. The skills of being, self-sufficient, using your initiative, being organized, and being able to juggle many different parallel streams of work are paramount. We have had experience with, very, very qualified people and people that are coming just out of their undergrad. And the most important skill that we've seen is really the ability to take initiative and self-organize in an environment where it's really fast-paced and everybody has to take ownership of their work streams and think creatively. So what we do look for is, of course, a culture fit within this environment. but also these skills, which are often, I think people think of them as like soft skills or not really worth talking about or a secondary thought. They're actually, you know, one of the first things that we look at.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Hannah. And I would like to ask a similar question to Daniel. So you're growing your company as well. And when you hiring people, what are you looking for in candidates, and how can academic people, people with an academic background, make themselves attractive to get hired in your companies and generally?
Yeah, no, I think I would completely echo Hannah's word. I think, you know, people generally overestimate the value of technical skills and underestimate the value of this badly called soft skills or translational skills. Obviously, you know, depending on the job, again, you need to tick those technical boxes, and that can be, you know, having a PhD if it's a very scientifically focused role. But to me, you know, and one thing that we definitely need in someone that joins Chronomics, besides what Hannah also described, is being resilient. And I think that's something that cannot be, again, overstated how important it is, especially in a startup, because, you know, you're facing a lot of challenges every day. You're gonna need to solve some sort of fire that is going on, and clearly there are people that handle this better than other people, and that, I think that's also something that you can learn. So, you know, I think that's something that we really look for, people that can, you know, even though a lot of things are going to happen, they, you know, kind of still keep it together and keep moving and in a positive way. And the other thing is communication. I think communication, both, you know, internally in the company and also, you know, when you go out and go and speak in places, or just like generally communicate what, you know, what the company is doing, why you're interested in doing that. I think that's also super important. And if you don't mind, I'm going to use also this opportunity to quickly mention that actually we're hiring at Chronomics, mainly a bioinformatician and computational biologist, and also a creative data scientist. So if anyone in the audience is interested, drop me an email at daniel@chronomics.com, or, you know, go to our website, the career section, and yeah, I'm sure we can discuss if this is a good fit for you.
Great. So lots of opportunities there for resilient scientists from you both. So I've got a question now for Peter, actually, which is more around entrepreneurship. So as a student, a PhD student or a postdoc, how should you approach entrepreneurship? Would you suggest starting with a problem and then trying to solve it? Or should you use your research experience to find a problem and a potential application area? You know, what are your thoughts, Peter, from having worked and been a researcher yourself and worked with others in developing ideas?
Thanks, Joe. That's an absolutely brilliant question for people like the audience here, where you've got a very deep expertise in a technological field. So I think the first 2 points on that really is that entrepreneurial ventures, in order to be an entrepreneur, you need to be fairly opportunistic. So I think, you know, that's the first thing. The second thing is there aren't rules that will dictate what will be successful and what won't be successful. But I think the consideration here then comes down to 2 things. So if you consider the 2 routes that are options here, the first route where you find a problem and you solve it, or if you take your actual research and you look for potential applications of that, these routes have different trajectories. If you've got an existing problem that is an existing pain point to the target audience that you're dealing with, it becomes very easy to sell the solution, because it's a known behavior. People are looking to solve it, and it's easy one to sell it. But secondly, it may be much easier to get funding in to take that product to the next level of development. If you're taking your research and then looking for applications beyond that, there's a much longer R&D process. Now, that process in R&D increases your risk as an entrepreneur. So you may need to look at how you're mitigating your risk and how you're balancing all of those things out. But also may come down to who is funding R&D projects in the criminal industrial sector. And actually, I can say that everyone here that's based in the UK is very fortunate to have the government organization Innovate UK, which does a huge amount of funding into taking and translating research into that. So the direct answer is there is no real advice. I'd say be opportunistic, look into your area that you're in, look at the funding opportunities, look at your risk profile, understand how you're mitigating the risk and how long can you take a risk for. and that'll probably guide you a little bit on how to make that decision.
Thank you, Peter. And we all know funding is always an interesting topic, also in academia, but also as a startup. So I have a question for Hannah about the challenges that you encounter when starting your own business. And what were the challenges that you faced or are still facing? And what advice would you give to others who are just starting out?
Yeah, you know, where do I start and how long do we have? The challenges in a startup are many, and it's sort of why you have to really be mission driven when you are building a startup or working for a startup, because it is one of the most challenging environments. You're building something from scratch and you're trying to disrupt an industry. So you always have 1,000,000,001 fires that you have to put out. One of the hardest things when you're just starting out building your startup is, I suppose, building the team. Because even the very first sort of tranche of investment that you get, the seed investment, oftentimes the investors, by and large, ask two questions. Is it a big enough market that they're addressing? And is this the team that can, you know, navigate the way to product market fit and, you know, return a 10x on their investment? And so the team is the most, and probably the most challenging, important, the most challenging thing that you work on as you, when you start. So it's finding the right co-founder, building the right culture, and finding those first employees that will really make the difference to your company. So we've been really adamant about the fact that our first employees also have to be mission driven, fully aware of like this, you know, super normal environment that a startup presents. And it's also why currently we're hiring for a bunch of new roles, because we've been closing a round of investment, and so we have this huge growth that is about to come at Juno. And yeah, one of those roles is a bioinformatician, and I can share some information about that. But the challenges, I'd say, is building a team when you start is the biggest challenge. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hannah. We're coming actually towards the end of our time for the panel discussion, and we'll be heading into the breakout rooms quite shortly. So just a quick reminder to please rename yourselves in Zoom underneath your picture or your name, so that we can allocate you to the right breakout rooms. The numbers are up on your screen now, and also so in the chat. So please do put those in. If at any time during the breakouts you'd like to swap to a different room, then please just leave that room and then indicate in the chat the new room that you would like to go into, and we can move you about behind the scenes. So back over to you, Daniel.
Yes, thank you, Jo. So while you are renaming yourself, I'm going to come to our final questions. So all of you have very interesting career paths, and you've all made your choice to not continue in an academic career. And now, after you chose your career paths, how do you know that you made the career choice? And I'd like to ask this question to Daniel. So are you happy with how everything went out, and are you happy with how things are now?
Yeah, so obviously when you jump into this, you don't know what's going to happen, really. I think you know that, in my opinion, you're happy, like you just know it. I think it's a bit like, you know, finding product market fit, or, you know, falling in love. It's the same thing. You just know it. And you stop wondering, am I doing the right thing, and spending more time thinking about, am I in the right place? You know, am I, you know, should I be doing something else? And, you know, you just start doing what you're doing, and you wake up every morning and you're like, yeah, this is great. So in my case, I'm really fortunate that, you know, I really think I found the framework where I could carry out kind of the projects and the missions that I wanted to do. So for me, yeah, the advice would be like, if you spend more time thinking about you are in the right place, you're probably not. But of course, you always, you know, think, even if you're in a really nice place, okay, what would happen if, or what would have happened if, you know, I had done a different thing, or, you know, what is this going to be forever? But I think it's all about, you know, finding the best thing that you can find. And I think once you do it, you know it.
That's fascinating. And I would also like to ask Mariya at the end. Mariya, you're not working in a startup now. You're working at the Sanger Institute, which is still an academic education, but you're not doing an academic role anymore. Are you happy with how things worked out for you, and how your career is now more in this collaborative environment?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. No, I am really happy with how things have worked out. I think as Daniel was saying, you kind of know when you found the right fit. And I really do wake up every day with lots of new things on my plate, and that's quite stimulating for me. And it's a really fun thing to have in a job. And like any other job, you have frustrating bits that go with it and whatever else. But the knowledge that I'm helping to get really exciting technology into the hands of people who can start to get it more widely adopted is really, really motivating for me. And because we work at the Sanger, you get to see lots of really exciting science, really exciting science every day. So in an intellectual capacity as well, it's very stimulating. So yes, I'm very happy with the switch that I've made. I get to stay immersed in the science while also driving the technology forward in the markets. Yeah. I think, yeah, that's.
Thank you, Mariya. I'd love to ask tons of more questions to all of you, but with regards to the time, I'm going to hand over to Joe.
Yeah, I'm going to just say a very big thank you to all of our speakers. It's been brilliant to hear your experiences, your insights, your thoughts, your points about collaboration, resilience, the opportunities are out there. And I know we'll have many more discussions in the breakout rooms. So we're going to head out into the breakout rooms now, but we'll be back here at about 12:15 or so for our final wrap up. And when we come back from the breakout rooms, we'd love to ask a participant from the audience here today, from each of the breakout rooms, just to come live on screen with us and just share some highlights, the real take-home messages from those breakout rooms. There'll be moderators in the rooms along with the panelists to help organize that. And I am really looking forward to hearing those highlights when we come back. So we'll see you all, Daniel and I'll see you all in about 20 minutes or so after the breakout rooms. So see you shortly.
So just as a reminder again, please make sure to rename yourself. There's still a lot of participants who haven't renamed them. You will be moved to one of the breakout rooms in the background, so you don't have to do anything about that. You just have to rename yourself with a number. If you don't have a number, we might just put you in any of the breakout rooms because we think you just, or you just put the number in the chat if you don't know how to rename yourself. And I hope you will all end up in the right room. Thank you.
So we're just waiting for everyone to be back. I hope you had some really interesting networking sessions.
Yep.
Very nice to hear. So I think we should all be back. So we're going to continue with our session. Welcome back. We would now like to invite one person per room to share their key takeaways from the networking session. So just briefly give all of us an idea what you talked about, what you take from the discussion. And if you would like to speak for your room, just raise your hand in the participants tab and we will unmute you, or you can just unmute yourself if that works. And I would like to start with room number 1 with Mariya's session, if that's fine.
Okay, so I don't think we had anyone volunteer. So I shall try and summarize, and if it's okay, Mariya, perhaps you can jump in. But we had a very interesting discussion, lots of questions about, different pathways and, very specific examples given by individuals who are in the position they are in now and how they would want to move, from academia into more kind of industry facing role. So the advice there was, Mariya, I'm paraphrasing you, but it's that, there's no fixed pathway. But the best thing to do is to start exploring different opportunities for yourself, and you know, through work placement or work experience to get a little bit more relevant experience on your CV to make yourself more attractive to potential employers looking for someone who has you know, exposure in both types of role. Would you like to add anything, Mariya?
No, I think that covers it. Yeah, I think that covers it. So the business development role involves lots of different skills and dealing with lots of different people. So you kind of have to have experience in several different areas. So you need to be scientifically quite knowledgeable, as well as, you know, be able to work with lots of different types of people, and make sure that you're very detail oriented, as well as you know, making sure that documents and stuff that need to be in place requires that level of focus on things. So yeah, it's quite a diverse role, but exciting because it is so varied.
Thank you very much, Mariya and Vika. Sounds like a really interesting discussion that you had in your networking session. I would like to invite Dorothea, who was part of our chat with Daniel in the second room. Dorothea, do you want to say in a couple of sentences what your key takeaways are?
Yes, thank you very much. My key takeaways were that I asked, for example, how a startup company can be started. And it's, for example, useful to use an accelerator company that can help you with some startup money, for example. But you have to look out for their requirements, for example, and it's a good idea to branch out from your original institute because it's more attractive for investors, for example. And other takeaways is that sometimes you don't plan to end up in a startup company, but if you are really interested in a topic, for example, you might end up there by chance. And we learned a lot about behind the science behind chronomics, which was very interesting.
Thank you very much. That was a great summary. From breakout session number 3 with Hannah, is there anyone who would like to share their thoughts?
So we had so many excellent questions that we didn't quite get around to the time of allocating somebody, but I can do the same as Vika, and then Hannah, you can fill in. So we had loads of amazing questions. One of them that stood out to me was, how do you reassure yourself to go down the entrepreneurship journey rather than follow something that's a bit more kind of safe and secure? And Hannah said that you shouldn't be doing it in a performative way, that you think the job is so glamorous to be a startup founder. It is hard work, and it's always got to be mission driven. So that's something that really stood out to me from our discussions. And we also talked about being a female in the field and how you can kind of get ahead. And we talked about some aspects of building your team as an early startup founder.
Very interesting conversation. And last but not least, from Peter's room, number 4, is there anyone who would like to share their thoughts?
I think Vasilis is going to share for us. So he should be unmuting.
Hi, yes. No, some really good conversation. It was interesting to kind of hear about his path kind of going through an MBA, but he kind of focused on how it's not actually necessary, but it kind of accelerates gaining some of that business acumen. And then he also kind of recommended starting an entrepreneurial journey by talking to incubators and other such programs, kind of really talking to other entrepreneurs, actually listening and watching some of their presentations. And then kind of lastly, what really stood out to me was kind of how he emphasized following kind of what you enjoy, what you believe in, kind of what's your ethos and kind of what makes you tick. And I think that really kind of resonated with kind of what some of us were kind of hoping for in our careers. So yeah, it was really good. So thanks. I don't know if he wants to add anything to that, Peter. But, thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you all. And thank you to everyone who fed back. I think we've had some brilliant discussions today, some really great insights. We're about to share with you a quick poll, an anonymous poll, because we'd love your feedback on this session. The poll will come up on your screens very shortly and should only take a minute or two to complete. It's up there now for you. So while we're completing the poll, I'm going to ask each of our speakers just to share some final thoughts with us all. So before we close, so I'm going to start with Hannah. Hannah, final word from you. You mentioned you're hiring. So how best can people get in touch with you?
Absolutely. We are hiring for a bioinformatician role. We're an exciting rocket ship of a company, so I recommend that you get in touch and apply or share as widely as you can with people that you think would be interested. I can drop a link in the messages here, but also it'd be great if we could send a link to the job description around via email after this call.
We will absolutely do that, Hannah. Thank you so much. Daniel, also hiring. So your pitch, please.
Yeah, so if you guys want to join a very fast-growing startup about to raise Series A, you're interested in the power of using large biological data or epigenetics, but also beyond to essentially improve people's health, and you're eager to jump into a new project, an exciting new way of doing science, then please come and join us. We have from the science side of things more around bioinformatics, computational biology, and also creative data scientists, but there are many other roles. So you can check them in the careers page from the Chronomics website. But also if you want to drop me an email at daniel@chronomics.com, I'm sure we can have a conversation and see, if you would enjoy being at Chronomics. So yeah, looking forward to hearing from you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Daniel. Quickly, Peter, when we were preparing for this the other day, you mentioned a really great book that you just read that you wanted to recommend. Can you share that with us, please?
Thank you, Jo. Yes.
What it is.
Yes, the name of the book is called Range, and it's written by an author called David Epstein. And really what it is a focus on diversifying your background. So a lot of you come from a very technical science background, and it's really about of bringing in other components of that. It was quite an eye-opener for me. Of course, my background is very diverse, but I often ask myself the question, should I be specializing a little more in something? But really, this just drove home the value of adding in different components to your career and bringing it through. So that's what I see. Shreya has actually just shared it. But I strongly recommend that anyone that's battling with that conversation of should I super specialize or should I expand my career choices by bringing in different components, I would definitely recommend reading it.
Yeah, and we'll share information about that book in the follow-up as well to everyone. I've just been asked there it is, David Epstein. Fantastic, thank you. And Mariya, final word from you. What advice would you give to people listening to this as a final top tip? Mariya?
Sorry, I keep forgetting to unmute myself. So my final top tip is keep your eyes open to different opportunities, especially if you're trying to transition out of an academic role into more industry-facing roles. Yes, try and drive your career forward, but often opportunities come up organically, and be open to them and, take them, even if it means really stepping out of your comfort zone, because that's when you're going to learn the most new skills and when you're really having to work for it. So that's that's what I would suggest. And somebody asked earlier about the name of the course I took. I can type that into the chat now. It's run by a company called Praxis Oral, and it's the fundamentals of knowledge transfer.
Thank you, Mariya. Also, thank you very much for your advice. We're now nearly at the end of our webinar, and I'm sure you all have tons of more questions, and I'm very sorry we can't have a networking session in person, so we try to do this as interactive as possible. And we would also like to say a big thank you to all of the speakers, everyone who joined us today, and all the people behind the scenes who were involved in making this event happen. Thank you very much from QTech and the whole team, also from the Wellcome Genome Campus. It was a true pleasure to speaking to all of you today. And please make sure to keep an eye out for our events by following QTech on Facebook. We have a really exciting upcoming webinar about the future of social businesses, with the Nobel Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Muhammad Yunus. It's happening on the 12th of August, and you can find the sign-up link in the chat. And I would like to hand over to Jo for some final remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. And I'd just like to echo those thanks from Daniel. It's been a brilliant event and so great to hear from 4 fantastic speakers of your insights and experiences and advice and top tips for scientists that are heading out there looking to explore what the possibilities are for careers for life scientists. And I think the overwhelming message is just try things. You know, you're scientists, you can do experiments. This is another experiment to do. So a big thank you from me too, and from the Biodata Innovation Centre and the Wellcome Genome Campus. Look out for our events too. We have an event coming up in a couple of weeks' time called Biodata Talks on the 18th of August, where we're actually speaking to 2 inspiring early career scientists who've done some great collaboration, entrepreneurial collaboration and innovation within this recent pandemic. And they'll be sharing their story about developing a new diagnostic method for COVID-19, which actually has potential massive impact. So I think Anka's put something up on the chat there. So have a great day, everyone. We hope to see you again at one of our events soon, and goodbye for now. Thanks ever so much.